Thank you for your good work in Section 2. I will be posting up comments in the discussion board very shortly. I've enjoyed reading through what you've had to say, and I look forward to seeing how you tackle the next few issues that we have in Section 3. Section 3 of the Sturba book, here, includes issues of abortion and euthanasia. So right to life, right to choose, right to die, the importance of keeping people alive sort of at both ends of life in terms of people being born and people dying. These are hot button issues in the public perception right now, and I think even more so because we're about to have a new Supreme Court justice. And likely, whoever gets appointed now will be there for quite some time because chief justices and associate justices tend to last for quite a while. President George W. Bush appointed the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who is at a relatively young age for being on the court, and he could be there for another 2, 3, or even 4 decades. So whoever gets appointed this time by Barack Obama, who is a very different kind of president than George W. Bush, will probably likely be there too for a very long time, and likely to be in the opposite camp from John Roberts, as well as the other conservatives, Scalia, Alito, and Justice Thomas. We're likely to still have a 5-4 court, or a 4-4-1 with Justice Kennedy in the middle, but who knows exactly what the future will bring. So it should be an interesting time. Roe versus Wade, of course, is the one Supreme Court case that most people in the country know if you have to mention one. There actually are other court cases out there, but most people tend to focus on that one because it is a very important issue to many people. Where exactly does life begin? Where does moral responsibility for people who are conceived begin? Does it begin at birth? Does it begin at conception? Does it begin at some point in between? And in your readings this week, you'll see moderate, liberal, and conservative viewpoints being put forward. Another issue that involves life is the euthanasia issue. I remember one of my seminary professors telling me that once upon a time, if we looked back in history, the doctor would come if someone was ill, sometimes terminally ill, and even if the person was brought into the hospital, they would be likely to send that person home and say, keep the person comfortable, but there's really nothing we can do. In our modern times, we have extraordinary technologies that can keep people alive for a very long time. But one of the issues that comes up now is the quality of life. Are people actually living a life worth living? And who gets to make those decisions? Is it you yourself? And what happens if you don't leave a living will or other kind of documentation expressing your views? And will people honor your views even after you've made them clear? Is it your spouse, your husband or wife? Is it your children? Is it your mother or father? That was one of the issues that happened, and I mentioned it in the announcements of the class, Terry Schiavo in Florida, where there were concerns that were different between the parents on one side and her husband on the other side, and exactly who had the responsibility and where should the state come into this. Should the state, whether it be the state of Florida or the entire nation, the United States, and what happens if the federal government and the state government don't agree? So these are all issues that can come up in that section. In the other section that we're talking about this during this time in our class, we talk about crime and punishment and responsibility. There's also a life and death issue there in talking about the death penalty. The United States is one of the last of the Western nations to use the death penalty, to have it on the books. And even then, it's not consistently applied across all the states. There are some states that use it more frequently than others. There are some that have banned it entirely. And there are some for which certain crimes qualify, but if committed in other states, those crimes would not qualify. So one of the things we can ask are different questions about the death penalty, how it's applied, whether or not it fulfills the functions that it is supposed to fulfill. Does it really fulfill justice? Does it really provide deterrence? Is it more an action of retribution or vengeance? Is there any kind of restitution that gets done? And even when we're looking at lesser crimes, the United States, again, is a country in which we imprison a higher percentage than almost anyone else in the world on a consistent basis. We may find that to be strange looking at totalitarian regimes that are out there, but in fact we incarcerate a lot of people on relatively minor offenses. The war on drugs has been very good for the prison building business. But in times of economic need, do we have the money to continue to pursue this kind of situation? So one of the things that we can look at in the different kinds of articles that we have this time are exactly what are we doing and exactly what are we getting out of it. Because of course a lot of prisons now tend to be crime factories. People go in to prison. A lot of people come out of prison because most people don't go to prison for life, especially for relatively minor offenses. But they are becoming better criminals while they're there. Because one of the few things that happens in prison is that they are in the company, in the environment, and sometimes under the care or protection of criminal factions. Because prisons keep people in, but within prisons, it's hard to manage sometimes. And different states, again, have different standards. So if you're in prison in one state, you might be treated differently from being in prison in another state. Or if you've committed certain crimes, you might be in a different kind of setting. But still, by and large, you will eventually get out. And who is it that we're letting go? What kind of person are we letting go back into society? And will we actually want to do something to make the person who's in prison someone who's a more productive member of society? So these are all things that we can discuss on the discussion boards. These are things that will come up out of the readings in the Sturba book, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say. I'll try to make videos a little more consistently for the rest of the class. I had my very last root canal just this last week, and I have a crown put on the root canal next week, but I can now talk again reasonably well, and I hope to be a little more consistent with the videos. Thanks.